This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
Great. Good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to call this meeting of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors to order here on January 16th, 2018. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of reflection by Supervisor O'Leary. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening, for my moment of reflection, I'd like to say a few words about the late Malin Peterson, a longtime member of the Eau Claire County community who was quite a leader in his own right. He retired in 2014. He had been co-department chair and ag leader. He'd served on numerous state committees for extension and was a real embodiment, I think, of the Wisconsin idea. And while he had retired, he still continued to serve in a part-time capacity and worked with youth, the chamber and other entities, and we will greatly miss him. And so I'd like to have a moment of silence in his honor.
Thank you, Supervisor Leary, and you're right, he was a great man who did a lot for this community, and particularly in the ag community. If supervisors would please take your keypads and indicate your presence here this evening. To establish a quorum, we have a number of folks. I know we've got Ray's at the Highway Conference and Jerry's in a warmer climate, nice at the moment, but I think we've got a quorum to move forward, and let's see, okay. Okay, yep, there it goes. And so we've got 21 present, I believe, yep. And so it's going to make 21 present, but I think everyone else is not. So we have a quorum. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on to the approval of the journal proceedings from December 19th. That's on page 3 to 6 of your meeting packet. Are there any suggested changes to the journal proceedings as drafted? I see none. I'd entertain a motion to approve them as drafted. Motion by Supervisor Smyer, second by Supervisor Beckfield. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item is public comment. This is an opportunity at county board meetings for members of the public to address the board. No one signed up. I'll ask if there's anyone from the public who would like to speak this evening who inadvertently had not signed up. I don't see anyone. We'll move on then to reports of the county board, and we have an oral report, and so Diane Cable and Jamie Gower and Tria Vang, if you'd come forward, please. This is regarding the on-call pay policy. It'll be a legislative item we'll be taking up later in the meeting, and as you recall, this was discussed at the board on December 5th, I think it was. So, good evening, everyone, and thanks for giving us this report. You ready for the power?
We are. All right.
Good evening, everyone. So real quickly, introductions. If you don't know, I am Diane Cable. I am the Director of Human Services.
I'm Jamie Gower, the Human Resources Director.
And I'm Tria Vang, the Payroll Administrator.
Okay. We're going to just take a few minutes of time to do a little bit of education and discussion about our requests that you will be talking about later on in your agenda. And I have to press something. Here we go. Thank you. So this is with regard to the on-call policy number 5521. And our request, Human Services request, to amend this on-call policy. This is about Human Services request for specifically the Human Services Department. This then helps to bring our operations of operating the on-call program in alignment then with the policy so that we do meet and comply with mandates and child welfare standards. The Family Services On-Call program is mandated to the county to be provided under statutes both 938 and 48, and it requires staff who are certified to provide intake services. And the program then provides protection to children, youth, and the community. And what this looks like is an on-call person is scheduled for each day, and they serve as an intake worker to respond to crisis situations regarding children or youth who are either taken into custody or need to be taken into custody with regard to either child abuse and neglect or delinquency or out-of-control behaviors within the community. As the on-call worker, they're making decisions around safety of children and youth and decisions with regard to safety regarding our community, determining if children are able to be returned to their homes and a protection plan or a safety plan put into place, or if a plan can be put into place for them to be returned to home or to be released to a parent or an adult, or to be able to, or if they need to be placed in a secure detention facility. These decisions are guided by law and they are guided by standards. They involve then assessing what the child or the youth may need if they are placed, if they are needing to have items provided for them, such as clothing, making appropriate arrangements for them for their own safety, and helping to connect them to then future services. So currently, our on-call service, pre-integration, as you may recall, that we are now into the Children's Court Services Department is now part of Human Services. And pre-integration, we had two staff who provided the on-call services 365 days a year. One of those two staff is on call every single day. This is above and beyond their regular position of 8 to 5. In the reviews that have been occurred by the state is that it has been noted at different times that we have not been in compliance in carrying out our on-call and after-hours services. So what we knew, and you may recall Rob Fatness talking about this, is that as part of the integration, we knew that we were able to enhance our on-call program. And so all our family services, social workers and case managers are being trained to provide that intake service, which expands our on-call operations and allows us to be in compliance with those standards and mandates. So excuse me, I'm going to make it. So our rationale for the policy change is the integration that occurred, which has been a very good thing for providing those services to family and children's and youth. This is for the Department of Human Services, and then it helps us to adhere to our operations for carrying out compliance for the Child Protective Services standards, improving our on-call systems, and essentially improving the outcomes for children and families. This is essentially new work for some of our staff because prior to that, we had two people who were just in the Children's Services, the Children's Court Services Department doing that work. So I'm going to turn this over now to Jamie.
Thanks, Diane. We thought it was important to clarify on-call pay versus called-in pay. So as we looked at these policy amendments for the folks in Human Services, what we wanted to note is on-call pay is pay that an employee receives when he or she is required to be available, essentially meaning that we are restricting the activities that this employee is able to do. So I'm carrying a phone or a pager, and my responsibility is to respond at any given time of the day to any calls or requests that come in for them. Called-in pay, then, is when an employee who is on call receives one of those telephone calls or requests to respond based on an emergent situation during their scheduled on-call shift. We are recommending 3 amendments to Policy 521 for on-call, and these amendments are for the folks in Human Services. Our first recommendation is to amend Section 4 of the policy to now include all eligible staff in Human Services assigned to be the primary on-call person. As Diane mentioned, the current policy currently restricts to just the 2 juvenile intake workers. And with this integration, we need to expand that in the spirit of enhancing our compliance and, again, providing that quality of care. The second amendment we'd like to make is we'd like to transition to daily rates for being on call. And these daily rates are listed here. For weekdays, an employee would receive $30 a day for carrying this pager. Weekends would be $48 a day, and holidays would be $60. And again, this is for those folks who are the primary on-call individual who are carrying the phone. These daily rates are based on an analysis that Tria and I completed with other counties within Wisconsin to look at comparables. So they're not the top of the market, they're not the bottom of the market, they're the middle of the road. The current policy was paying employees who are on call $2 an hour for that time. And so 24-hour shift equated to $48 a day. We're just transitioning or making a recommendation to transition to the daily rate. The third and final amendment to the policy is that we'd like to amend pay practices so that those folks in Human Services, in addition to the daily rate they receive for carrying that phone, will also be compensated for responding to those emergent situations. So they receive additional dollars in compensation for that time. We believe with this third amendment, again, as we looked at comparables in the market, other counties, and we continue to think about things from a recruitment and retention perspective, that this is a practice that we found to be very comparable within similar on-call programs in Human Services within other organizations. Any questions or?
Thank you. Any questions? I know it'll come up later. It's coming back from the Human Resources Committee, but Supervisor Pagonis.
I'd like a definition of a day. So let's just say on a Monday, we have an employee at work. During that Monday, they're not on call until 5 o'clock when they would be on call? Is that how?
So that's a good question.
Could you come to the mic?
I'm sorry.
Community television is recording and just make it easier for everybody to hear.
And so everybody can hear me?
Especially with your voice.
Yes. So very good question. Right now they're operating that if they're the person on call, they are on call. We're required to provide that 24-hour on-call availability. So it's work that can happen at any time during the day.
Midnight Monday morning or 12:01 Monday morning to 11:59 Monday night.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Even if they work 8 to 5, I think that might be
Correct.
the question.
Yes.
So the implementation of this program then, it doesn't really alter it, it's just going to alter it's no longer going to be Aaron and Cindy, it's going to be a lot of people.
Correct. Yes.
Supervisor Snyder.
Yes, I wonder if you've done, the question is about budget impact, because you're adjusting rates and so on. Have you done a projected impact or cost?
So we've considered this, and it's part of our current budget for 2018.
But it's an increased cost, though.
Yes, and we considered that as we were doing our budget.
Do you have a dollar amount for that, please? I realize I'm pushing it here.
26. So we're estimating 26,813.
That's addition.
That's what we figured within our budget.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Supervisor McKinney.
Thank you. Just like to clarify that when someone is on call, their activities, I'm assuming, would be restricted as to what they'd be able to do in their normal day-to-day life.
So that's a good question. So they have to be able to get to the sheriff's department with, I think it's 45 minutes is what we said. They have to be responsible to be able to respond out. So they have to be available and in a condition to be able to report. So in a working state. Yes.
Supervisor Anton.
Thank you, Chair. The question is, when the person is ordinarily working in the regular job, this is in addition to this is an add-on to their wage rate when they carry the pager.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so they would be making regular rate, doing whatever it is they're normally assigned because they carry the pager, there'd be this additional rate. When they go off the regular assignment, 5 o'clock, whatever, then they would get this additional rate depending on whether it's weekday, weekend, or holiday. And they would also, when they respond, get an additional amount.
So they receive,
Three different categories.
so they receive pay for carrying, to be on call scheduled, for carrying the phone. And then they would be paid if they have to go out and respond.
Additional.
If they have to go out and respond, and in that time frame, it would be after hours. During their regular workday, it's part of their regular pay of work. If they have to respond to to work, no. Only for carrying the phone.
When they go out, they're carrying the phone, but when they go out, then you get an additional amount for going out?
Not during the regular workday, it's part of their.
Say 7 o'clock at night.
7 o'clock at night, they go out and they respond, and they would be working. They would get paid for their work, yes, responding to that. That's the call-in component. So when Jamie explained the difference in categories, the call-in, you're being called in and you would be compensated for that time.
At the rate at which they would normally be compensated,
Correct, yes.
whatever kind of work to do that
Yeah.
rate.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no overtime element within this.
No, they are not eligible. They are not eligible for overtime.
Supervisor Mortimer.
A question for Diane, if your voice holds out.
We're doing okay. I was doing really good.
You're doing great. I know our volumes from our Human Services board meetings, our volumes are really increasing over the past couple of years. And right now, we only have one on-call person at a time. And larger metropolitan counties, of course, have multiple people on call at a time because they have several calls coming in simultaneously even. Are we even close to that in the volumes where we would need a second person on call?
So that's a good question. We have not felt that we've needed to do that. It hasn't been at that level to need to assess that. And the frequency of having that level of multiple calls at the same time, we have not thankfully reached that. Yep.
Supervisor DeLuca.
I have 2 questions for you. So if I am the staff person working my normal day and I am on call during that day and evening, does it limit what I can do in my normal day working? Am I kind of assigned to my desk to make sure I'm available for the calls? Would I be expected to do my normal working activity and go and do other things and then get called in off of something else that I might be working on?
Yeah. So that's a good question. It's interesting. Counties kind of operate that in different ways. So currently our 2 intake workers, they're the 2 that get called and then they do their regular work. And if one is not available to respond at that moment, they have another intake worker that dispatch may be contacting. So if there's an emergency during the working hours, now they call the department and then we help assign that work. We have our on-call person who we could be going to help respond, but it's not our only person during the working hours that we can be helping to having respond.
And my other question was, you mentioned the $26,000 plus dollars that were already in the 2018 budget. But I also see there's a resolution regarding those day, weekend, and holiday pay rates, and it lists it at $14,125. Is that above?
No, that's including all. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Smyer.
A couple of quick questions. In total, how many people are going to be assigned to that on-call?
So we would have probably about 30 people who would be eligible We're currently phasing this in to help people learn and shadow, so we would have about 30 eligible people, and it's a mandatory program, and they voluntarily sign up. I will imagine that we'll have probably an average core group of 10 to 15 people, primarily doing the on-call program.
So at maximum, it would be once a month. No, I'm sorry, at maximum it would be 3 times a month. That you might be on call if the group is 10.
It could be.
At minimum, once a month.
Correct.
My other question has to do with the motivation of the staff or their response to this proposed policy.
Mm-hmm.
Because anytime, I know from experience, anytime you talk about on-call and adding on-call, you can have a variety of responses to that. What has been the staff response to this proposal?
So when we initially started talking about it, people were pretty hesitant and concerned about that. But as we have evolved, and the staff from the Children's Court Services Department have been very helpful in helping to educate, people do want to be compensated, though, for doing this additional work. And right now we have people going off to training and starting to shadow our current on-call people.
Well, I understand the compensation. I'm just talking about their motivation to do the on-call.
We have a group that is willing to do that and participating, yes.
And that's the 10 that you mentioned?
Yes.
Approximately?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And those are all the requests to speak. I see, is there anyone else who has questions at this time? All right, well, thank you all very much for the presentation. Appreciate that. And moving on to our monthly report from County Administrator Catherine Shaw.
Thank you. I have a couple of updates to provide you. The strategic planning process for this current year is beginning to wind down. There will be a presentation we're anticipating to the board prior to the organizational meeting in April, where you will be given a full accounting of where each of the different strategic initiatives are at and the successes that have been accomplished and the changes that have been implemented because of that work. Also, this last week, the Finance Committee and the Committee on Administration met jointly to discuss the next round of strategic planning that would occur after the new board begins in April of 2018. And there was a lot of discussion about the potential process and changes that we would potentially make. And if you just keep tuned, we will be giving you regular updates on what that will look like. There have been some modifications that are anticipated, and as soon as we have that sketched out a little bit more fully, that will be shared with the board as well. Also, the Economic Development Summit, we're calling it Summit number 2, is in the planning stages. As you will recall, the county and the city of Eau Claire joined together to host an Economic Development Summit over the last 2 years. Various stakeholders from around the county joined together and had conversation about how our region approaches economic development. They produced an initial document with some recommendations, one of the recommendations of which was that the entities that are involved in economic development take the work that the first summit had done and continue the conversation. And so memorandums of understanding were passed by all of the respective organizations, and we now have the names of representatives from each of those organizations. And we're working with the facilitator to set up the process and the meetings for the second Economic Development Summit. There's currently a web page on our web that has all of the information regarding the background of the first Economic Development Summit, and we will use that same vehicle for keeping you apprised of the work for the second Economic Development Summit. The third item is the Local Government Institute grant that the county, the city of Eau Claire, and the city of Altoona jointly received to work on the creative economy in the Chippewa Valley. The third of 3 meetings is occurring this coming week on Thursday evening. We've had excellent participation in the meetings, and if you'd like more information from some of your peers, you can speak with either Chair Moore or Supervisor Bates, both of whom have attended, and have been part of those meetings. The work, however, after the 3 meetings will not be done. There is much to do afterwards, and we'll continue working with futurist Rebecca Ryan and our partners to actually potentially implement changes that come through and that come out of these sessions. And we don't yet know what they're going to look like, but again, we will use the vehicle of our website to keep you apprised of what's happening with that initiative. And then finally, annual reports. Every year, through our regular cycle of reporting, our board will receive annual reports from each of the different departmental areas, where you'll see a review of activities from 2017 and information on some of the trends that have affected the work that they have done. And it will provide a good point of departure for our actual strategic planning process at the board level in May of this year. I can send links to all of the board via email after the meeting so that you don't have to try to find all the links on our website. And that is all I have unless there are questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Catherine this evening? I see none. Thank you very much. Moving on, written reports. There's contingency fund report on page 7, the jail population report on page 8. And now presentation of petitions, claims, and communications. I would just like to note or remind you of the legislative breakfast scheduled with our legislative delegation next Monday. So if you can make that, please sign up. You should have gotten a reminder earlier today from Angie. Are there any other announcements that anyone would like to make this evening? I see none, so let me flip my agenda and move on to, Janet, are there? Our first item of business here is file 89.
That section 2.04.010A, C, and E of the code be amended to read Rule 1 meetings.
May I have a motion, please? A motion by Supervisor Leary, second by Supervisor Cronk, and an explanation by Supervisor Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As this board is very well aware, we are currently holding our annual meetings in November. It's the first Tuesday after the second Monday in November. And we switch that if an election occurs during that time, strikes on the day of our meeting, to the Wednesday after that meeting. It turns out that because there is a conflict in the dates that our PC 400 apportionment forms are due to municipalities and the Wisconsin Department of Revenue by November 15th. That out of the next 7 years, 5 of those years, there would be a conflict in that date. So this particular ordinance authorizes changes the code, if you will, in order that we permanently have our annual meeting on the first Tuesday in November, and it would be switched to the day after if there was an election. It certainly will resolve the issue of concern that our county clerk has in getting the apportionment information for the apportionment in. So I urge your support to this permanent change.
Thank you, Supervisor Bates, for the explanation. Any questions or discussion on this matter? Any questions or discussion? I see none. It appears you're ready to vote, so please do so at this time. The motion is concerning file 89, and the motion is amend certain sections of Chapter 2 of the Code concerning when the county board meets. Supervisor Leary, if you re-vote there, please just by take. Thank you very much, and that's adopted unanimously. File 92.
To repeal and recreate section 10.81.030D of the code, restricted parking areas.
May I have a motion on this, please? A motion by Supervisor DeLuca and second by Supervisor Lavelle and Supervisor Bates.
Thank you. This is again part of the updating of our code, part of Title 10 in the strategic plan process, and it addresses parking space issues. The changes here are really concerning spaces that no longer exist, and also it changes who's responsible for assigning the parking places. Currently, all parking spaces for specific purposes are assigned by the county administrator. This changes it that the facility manager director will be responsible for this. And of course, takes out the fact that the spaces that were assigned are no longer in existence.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? I see none, so please vote on this motion. It's file 92 and repealing and recreating certain sections of section 10 of the code concerning parking. Let's see. She's working, it's not working. I'm not sure, Supervisor Clark.
Just tell us what
The only thing I can do is change you to absent. Does somebody else want to just try it?
Okay. Why don't you make it absent? And that's adopted
And did you want to vote yes?
unanimously?
Thank you.
She gets to see it before she said that.
Section, or file 83.
This is substitute amendment number 1 to resolutions amending the Eau Claire County Human Resources Employee Policy Manual.
Okay, before you did, you said this is substitute amendment number 1. Keith, do we take the main motion and adopt amendment number 1 as an amendment? Or can we take the motion? So the motion is not concerning substitute amendment number 1.
The first motion is on the original resolution, and
Okay.
then you move substitute amendment.
Okay.
Resolution 83, amending the Eau Claire County Human Resource Employee Policy Manual.
Great. I have a motion on this, please. A motion by Supervisor Gatlin, second by Supervisor Conlon, and an explanation by Supervisor Clark.
There were just a couple of very minor wording changes from the original resolution. And I'm not sure I remember which ones they were.
One of them, I think, was effective date, because the original resolution said December.
That's what it was.
This
It was
one
the
now
effective
indicates
date
the first
clause. We didn't get it done in time.
full pay period following adoption.
Right.
That's what's in there. So would you want to move, would you be willing to move substitute amendment number 1?
I will move the amendment.
May I have a second to that, Supervisor Conlon? Okay, so now what's before us is not approving or not approving the substance, but whether to choose to take up substitute amendment number 1 as opposed to the original motion. Any discussion on this motion to amend? Any questions? Okay, so I'll repeat what we're voting on. So we're voting on whether to take up substitute amendment number 1, or amend the original resolution with substitute amendment number 1, which is on page 14 of the packet. Appears you're ready to vote, so please do so at this time. So all discussion.
Sorry.
Okay, there we go.
Can't, doesn't work.
It's still not, there's a battery.
Where'd that Clark go?
Okay, that looks like
That would be a
everybody's
yes.
voted, but I don't see.
Okay, I'm just going to advance it then because
Okay.
Did you
and
want to vote yes?
You want to vote yes?
Yes.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so we're back to the main motion as amended by substitute amendment number 1. And Supervisor Clark, if you'd speak to that, please.
I think the explanation that was given earlier was really helpful. And I just want to say a couple of things about this. First of all, this was brought about because of the integration of the two factions, Human Services and Children's Court Services. Also, just as a point of information, last year, in 2017, there were 460 call-outs for those two people to handle. So this is important to spread this workload out a little bit more so that there are more people taking on the responsibility of being on call. Just remember the difference between on call and called in. And I urge your support. This is a very important change to our policy manual.
Thank you. Discussion or questions or comments? Supervisor Bates.
Thank you. This change is a change that hopefully will integrate a whole lot more in an immediate response, an immediate effective therapeutic response to call-ins. So I think as we look at this, we're taking on this program. I think the one thing that we want to be very sure of is that we do it right. That we're sure that families and children get the information and the kinds of interventions that they need right at the onset. And I believe that this particular system will allow that to happen in a very efficient way.
Thank you. Supervisor Beckfield.
I'd like to thank HS and the HR department for coming back and re-explaining that to us all. They did a very good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, let's vote. The motion before us is to amend, it's file 83, and the motion is to amend the HR employee policy as amended concerning policy number 521 on call. Supervisor Ritchie, if you'd re-vote there and take for some reason, I'm not quite sure. And Supervisor Bates and Clark's.
That's my vote.
Oh, maybe Gary Gibson can make it work instead of, or Pat Lavelle pounding. Okay, golly darn it. That is not, okay.
I vote in favor of the resolution.
Okay, we'll get that, and Kathy, or Supervisor Clark, you also? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Moving on to file 102. And I think in the title, there's a typo, it's abolish 1, not 1.05.
Abolish 1.0 FTE CCS supervisor position and create 1 FTE social work manager position.
May I have a motion on this matter? Supervisor Miller with a second by Supervisor Gatlin, and an explanation by Supervisor Clark.
Thank you. I can't vote, but I can talk. The Human Services Department needs to create a unit for serving children's mental health and long-term support needs. And in looking at their staff, they decided that it would be a benefit to abolish the one full-time CCS supervisor position and create 1 full-time social work manager position. The state has decreed that there will be no wait list for children with long-term care service needs, and this will provide the department with an opportunity to meet that criteria. There will be an increase of $6,993, but this will be taken care of through their current budget and various funding sources which are listed on your fact sheet. So there will be no budget amendment or changes needed. It's all taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on this matter, Supervisor Snyder.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't the CCS positions fully reimbursable, but the other one is not? The other one is property tax levy or other sources? No?
Catherine, do you know the answer? And I know, is there any objection if Diane Cable answers that question? So Diane, if you come up to the mic, that'd be great, thanks.
The position will be covered by all programs that have revenues to help offset the costs of the position, so there was no tax levy connected to the position.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay. And Supervisor Dunning.
I guess mine has been answered. I'm sorry, I was looking
Okay,
at the wrong one.
that's just fine. Any other discussion or questions on this matter before we vote? I see none. So if you would, the motion, it's file 102, and the motion is to abolish one FTE CCS supervisor position and create one FTE social work manager position. So if you please vote.
Nope.
Oh, but Colleen's worked this time. Passes unanimously, 22-1.
Kathy, want to vote yes? Thank you.
Okay, just seeing if I could trick you, but I couldn't. Okay, passes unanimously, file 103.
Abolish 1.73 FTE Administrative Associate 3 position and abolish 1.0 FTE Highway Field Worker position and create one Administrative Associate 3 position.
May I have a motion, please? Motion by Supervisor Lavelle, second by Supervisor Beckfield, and an explanation by Supervisor Clark once again.
As I said in committee, this was a noble experiment that really didn't work out the way that the highway commissioner or the committee thought that it would. A while ago, we cut that full-time administrative associate 3 position. We cut it from full-time to part-time. Yeah, 7.73 it was. And the problem with it is recruitment. Since that change was made, we have had at least three people in that position. And because there are no benefits involved with a part-time position, this position, it was difficult to keep people. And so what the committee is proposing is to abolish that position, abolish one field worker position, and hire or create one full-time administrative associate 3 position that works in the highway office. It's an important position, and we want to make sure that we get someone who will get the benefits and who will stay. There will be a savings of $12,383, which will be utilized by the highway department for seasonal workers. And I urge your support.
Thank you very much. John Johnson, Highway Commissioner, is here. If there's questions, my understanding is the Highway Committee also supported this.
Yes.
It's coming from HR, the Highway Committee will support. Questions or discussion on this one? Any concerns? I see none. It appears you're ready to vote, so please do so. It is file 103, abolishing and restructuring staffing in the Highway Department as described. And that's adopted unanimously. File 87.
To amend section 2.04.455C of the code and to repeal section 2.05620 of the code, Eau Claire County Industrial Development Agency. To amend section 2.44.020B of the code, to repeal chapter 2.72 of the code, sale of surplus county real property, and to amend 4.13.010 of the code, sale of surplus county land.
May I have a motion on this, please? A motion by Supervisor Buchanan, second by Supervisor Schroffnagel, and an explanation by Supervisor Gibson. And Rod Esslinger is also here if there's questions about.
Yeah, Rod, if anybody's got any questions, but the county used to be involved in land acquisitions, recruitments, retention efforts, and financing in the past, but they haven't been involved, and they've only met twice in the last 8 years, and there was a lot of confusion as to why they were even meeting, because there's really nothing for them to do anymore. So what this ordinance does is it eliminates the IDA process, that their involvement, so that role is diminished. So this is just basically changing language to support them not existing. That's the easiest way to put it.
That works. Thank you very much. Any questions for Supervisor Gibson or discussion on this one? Any questions or discussion? I see none, so please take your keypads and vote on file 87, amending various sections of the code to effectively then eliminate the Eau Claire County Industrial Development Agency. And that's adopted unanimously. And okay. And lastly, file 99.
Authorizing payment of vouchers over $10,000 issued during the month of December 2017.
May I have a motion on this matter? A motion by Supervisor Leary, second by Supervisor Gatlin, and it speaks for itself on page 32 and 33 are the vouchers this month. Any questions on any of those vouchers before we vote? I see none, so please take your keypad and vote on file 99. The motion is to authorize payment of vouchers over $10,000 issued during the month of December. And that's adopted unanimously. And we are at the end of our agenda. Whoops, sorry. Oh, yeah. We're at the end of our agenda. Thank you, everyone. Our next meeting is the third Tuesday of February. Oh, no, it's the day afterwards, because that's a primary day. It's Wednesday, February 21st.
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you, everyone. Meeting's adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.